Welcome to this week's episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. Although I'm wearing roses today, we're going to blossom in another direction. We're talking about another, well, absolute, not quite an essential oil, gifted from a beautiful flower. Liz loves it. It's tuberose. How are you, Liz?
I do. I'm really well, and I am excited to talk about tuberose. But I'm just fascinated by the way it's come through for me this week, because usually I can like take loads of information out of my head, just write it down, just put that through ChatGPT and say, "Can you give me any order that for me?" And this week ChatGPT was rubbish, so I was like, "Okay, you got to get the books out." And it was just like, "Oh, and another book, and another book, and another book." So that's quite interesting because that hasn't happened to me for ages. So
Yeah.
yes, nice to have all the books, all the books. Yeah.
Now, one interesting thing about tuberose, looking at the plant, it's native to Mexico, but it's a bulb. And when I think about floral essential oils, I don't normally think of bulbs, but off the top of my head, are there any? I can't think of any. Are there any other essential oils or absolutes that come from bulbs?
Peonies have got a bulbs, aren't they? So, but they're sort of perfumes. You don't really have essential oils. Gladiola, no, not an essential oil. No, I can't think of any either. Now you say it. Oh, iris. Iris is a lovely essential oil of iris, which is like it's a rhizome rather than a bulb. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it is, but it is the flower is it's known, I think, as bone flower in Mexico. The Aztecs used to call it that because of how white it was. They thought it resembled bones, but it is almost like that jasmine scent. I know the scent is stronger at night. It can be very hypnotic. I really like it, but how do you feel about it?
I think it's lovely. I think it's very intoxicating and narcotic. But I got to say, it's so expensive. It wouldn't be one that I'd go, oh, I need to spend that money on that.
Mm.
However, I think if I were a perfumer, I think I probably wouldn't be able to live without it. It's just got such a beautiful, heady scent. Interestingly, did you know it had been recently been reclassified as a plant?
No, I did not realize that.
So this is quite interesting. So, do you know the Latin name?
Not off the top of my head for this one, no.
So it's Polianthes tuberosa. Polianthes is Greek for lots of flowers. Tuberosa means succulent tuber. So there's no kind of hint to a Latin name at all in that, like in a species family at all in that. And it had previously been guessed that maybe it might be associated with lilac because it does kind of have a bit of a lilac-y scent. But in 2018, some bod went, oh, I'm going to do a DNA test on this to find out. And it's an agave. So that's
Wow.
quite, yeah, so quite interesting, isn't it? Especially since it's like been revered by since pre-Columbian times, really. So the Aztecs used it ceremonially. As you say, they called it bone flower, which I thought was really interesting because it was almost like a double entendre. You're quite right that I investigated it because I was like, well, what are they implying there? But yes, because they associated it with the rites of the dead and they said it looked like a polished bone. But I thought, well, that's quite funny because it's so aphrodisiac and narcotic. Are they associating it with an erection? But no, I couldn't find anything written there. But I think that's a good way to remember how it works, this oil. So yeah, what's interesting when you realize it's an agave, that it's secreting some kind of honey. Paracelsus says that any plant that gives a lot of nectar, which it does, is associated with the heart. And when you find it in the Mexican rituals for the dead, but also love rituals and sex rituals and fertility rituals. So interesting how it kind of went, oh, both meanings.
Would you say it's something like a life, death, and rebirth kind of flower, or does it just seem to be attached to those two different, the forming of life and the ending of life, do you think?
So one of the main chemical constituents in it is indole. And I'm always interested by the term indole because it's so similar to indolent. So don't be so indolent, don't be so lazy. But actually, indolent doesn't only just mean lazy and without effort. It means without pain. And one of the sort of effects of indolence, I always say it makes you feel like you're languid, like a cat that you want to just stretch out in the sun. You know, that's the effect of indole. But also that it makes you just be so still, like the stillness of the dead. And so I think that like they put it on altars for Day of the Dead. And so you've got that kind of heady out of like almost like trance like effect of it that you could be imagine or be open to the spirits visiting.
Yeah, wow. Before we kind of dive into kind of go down that spiritual journey, is there many uses for it from a physical point of view in health and well-being, would you say?
So you don't really get it cited in like clinical aromatherapy books, although, as I say, indole does mean without pain. So I find it quite good. So I've probably said on videos before, I have really bad restless legs, and they cramp at night, especially if I'm tired. And I used to find that if I use so clary sage would be the usual thing that I would use, or magnesium in the bath. But when I was sort of feeling very, very low before my period, I used to find tuberose was really good for that sort of relaxation and bringing you down, and that would help with stopping the cramps. So I would definitely say that sort of aching muscles, cramps, that's what I would use it for. But I don't think it's really cited that often clinically that way. It's an emotional healer than anything. But in the same way, you'll often see people make like an illusion that it might be good for impotence, it might be good for frigidity. But I think that's more of like the emotional movement rather than the actual physical movements of like, I don't know, nitric oxide, for example, that would do that. It would be more emotional.
Yeah, it's not an oil that I've worked with a lot, but in the reading that I was doing before we chat today, it was kind of suggesting more that for things like impotence, it was more to do with getting the stress or the anxiety out of your head first, so that the body does what it needs to do, type of thing. So yeah, I
Yeah.
guess as a floral oil, you could include it in your moisturizer. There's plenty of other oils that are great for that as well, but if you had to, you could. But yeah, I think, like you said, it's more that emotional. This is kind of more of a special occasion essential oil or absolute, isn't it?
I think that so I'm skipping books. So Valerie and Worwood talks about how she thinks that it's very good for if you are not doubting, if you're doubting yourself, if you don't feel very confident, if you don't feel very pretty, if you kind of, a lot of places are sort of citing it for feelings of shame. So yes, those sorts of things kind of might go into a moisturizer, but I think I'd rather have rose and do some actual physical work with rose or jasmine. Do you know this book, Aromatherapy Anointing Oils by Joni Kaiman Ruabal?
No, that's not what I have in my collection.
Oh, I love this book. I do love this book. So it's all about how you use it ceremonially, and they are Jewish ladies, and of course it's using in Hebrew rites a lot. And I thought this was really interesting because it really ties in with some work that we're doing with Katie Holland in the school in Sacred Dance and Blue Lotus course. So the ladies say mistreatment in the context of spirituality can be deeply traumatic. This form of hurt can come from the teachings of a theology that create fear or guilt, or it may be from a psychological injury or physical injury. Sorry, insults. Because this harm occurs in the name of spirit, people who experience it must cope with very far-reaching effects. Often it results with a loss of trust in spirituality and feelings of being cut off from spirit, when in truth, spirit could be a source of great healing. So tuberose promotes healing on all levels and is especially useful for spiritual mistreatment. It enhances all healing modalities and helps us to discern which ones will be most effective at the time. It supports, comforts, and assists in the healing of the wounded heart, confused mind, and dishonoured spirit. Tuberose assists those who have been spiritually mistreated to enter the process of healing and guides that process in a manner that is protective, respectful, and compassionate. And so, how this made me think of Katie's work. So just to put it into context, Katie does somatic dance therapy, and in each session that we do, we sort of look at an aspect of past life healing that we might come through, and this is really helpful for people who are doing kind of priestess work, because that feeling of, oh, I have this deep remembering of having done this before. Well, if you have a deep remembering of being like a really high up priestess, the chances are, if it really did happen to you, you have been married to a god. That's what the ritual was. You made promises to that god. And one doesn't really get divorced from a god very often. And so in that sort of, you've got to believe in past lives for this to make sense to you. But if you are on that karmic pathway of coming through backwards and over again to have that high level, like high priestess role, then you potentially have a lot of soul contracts that you are still trying to live out, even though that's not actually what you're supposed to be doing in this lifetime. And I see it particularly in one lady that I know, who is making herself profoundly ill because she really thinks that she needs to save the earth, and she is physically doing a job where she's into recycling and looking after the seas and stuff like that, but she's so overwhelmed by the hugeness of this kind of mission that she's brought through that it's sinking her. And
wow.
And so doing this kind of work of saying, okay, I'm happy to do this work, but only in my incarnation. I don't want everything else that I brought through from loads and loads of other things to just that. But then also on a different level, bashing Catholics again, sorry, but this thing of like guilt over sex, that sex is dirty, and kind of, I call it like the Magdalena wound of, you can either be Madonna or you can be whore. You can't be both in the Christian eyes. That's bringing through that sort of, well, to think about sex is dirty, and then to actually go and have a sexual relationship for some women is really, really hard, and I'm sure for men too, I have to say, but obviously that's not my experience personally. And so those kind of situations where it's really kind of high level spirituality that's really affecting from a high level, but on a day-to-day basis. And so in Aromatherapy of the Soul, which is Valerie Worwood's book, she talks about how a tuberose helps you to see the truth of what is the truth from really ancient things. So interesting if you're doing the kind of work that I do, because when you're looking, so let's use the priestesses, the Melissa priestesses for a start off, you're looking at academic literature, and you've always got this lens of, well, the Greeks kept it secret. Anything that you can find was written by the Christians, and the Christians were dissing it. So you've always got this like corrupted lens that you're working through. And she talks about how it can bring hopes and dreams into right relationship. And so if you were thinking about it from an auric point of view, for example, rather than the chakras, you're probably looking at really outer layers, like 6th layer, which is to do with karma, that not necessarily like restoring hopes and dreams after they've been crushed by people, but actually, well, let's have a look at this. You know, you are trying to save the earth. Is that a grandiose endeavor? Could you actually do that? Or can we actually take ego out of it and make it a useful thing for you to do? And so by doing that kind of work, that's really good for somebody's anxiety, that they're not feeling the weight of 1,000 years of just kind of doing that over and over again. It's just like, you in this incarnation, what can you do? And then working, so ego's out of it and it's achievable, and it's like, what's the word I'm trying to say? Like, if you, that you could actually manage, it's manageable. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, as I was working with this oil, it really reminds me of, I think it's a summer oil. I know they also use it often in leis when you go visit in Hawaii and different things like that. Being white, I love it as being a bit of a moon oil as well. So I think it kind of, for me, it brings in this energy or this kind of timeline of a hot summer's night. You know, you can lay in bed and, oh, it's too hot and it's all like you're sticky and you're restless. And the word frenzied comes through for this one. It would help when you're frenzied. But then tuberose is just like, well, it's a lovely hot night. Get outside and relish in it. Stay up all night. You know, make love, do all those types of things. So I think whenever we're feeling frenzied or crippled or overwhelmed, or you know there's too much for us to handle, I think this is a really nice one, like a cat, just that, you know, just kind of, it'll be right, I'll take it slow, and just kind of ease more into the relaxation side of things rather than get overwhelmed by the enormity of the task we perceive we must achieve. Would you agree?
I totally agree. Yeah. And I think I remember saying this about jasmine oil, but I think it really applies here. Jasmine always makes me think of the film Passage to India, which I remember talking to you about it, and in it there's very sort of well-to-do young sort of blossom of an English rose, and she goes to India, and they go on this sort of excursion, and she goes into this beautiful Indian temple, which is in the sort of cliff face in the rocks, and just the energy of the place overcomes her, and to the extent that she's like, her imaginings are so like vivid, that she thinks that the very kind man who has taken her there as the guide has made advances to her, and she makes accusations, and of course this is very difficult for him because this is a time of the Raj and she's white and he's Indian, and that's, you know, that's the politics of the film. But I do think that you kind of have that same effect with tuberosa, which is like, you know, you almost have like an out of body experience where you enter the perfumed garden where sensuality lives. Yeah.
Mm. For people that are maybe familiar with jasmine but not so familiar with tuberose, how would you separate them in their effects, do you think? I find tuberose does have that more of a summer feel. It kind of has those warm summer nights, that almost tropical kind of feel about it, whereas jasmine for me it can be hot nights, but it also can be cold winter nights for me as well. It can kind of be any of the moons, whereas I'd only work with tuberose probably in summer full moons. What about yourself?
I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. So when you say the effects of that, you mean how it makes you feel?
I guess the vibration around it and the energy.
Yeah, I think it is. So jasmine, I always say the Sanskrit say where there is jasmine, there can be no worry. So that says to me that that's a blanket no to any worry. I
Mm.
don't think tuberosa has that. I think tuberosa is, don't worry about love. Don't worry about stuff that is out of your controls, like spiritual out of control. So, for example, jasmine would be helpful with money, for example, worries about money. I don't think tuberosa has that, if that makes
Mm.
sense. In terms of actual effects, jasmine has amazing effects on the skin. It has incredible effects for IBS and for colitis and digestive and endometriosis, and physically it's a very, very helpful oil. I don't think you can live without jasmine. Personally, you definitely can live without tuberose.
Yeah. Do you think that's the case, that just jasmine has been more widely researched and we've discovered more uses for it? Or would you actually say, just looking at the chemistry of tuberose, it's not that impressive as a therapeutic oil?
I think that you've skipped through 1,500 years or even 2,000 years and longer of people going, I'm going to try this plant and see what it can do. You know, we didn't discover that it was that jasmine was very good for like digestive problems just because somebody put it under a microscope. It's because medicine people have been going, I know what will work, I know what will work. And before we had the microscopes, people were relying on their skills of observation and trial and error. There's no way that they wouldn't have tried a plant like tuberose, which is like revered, that they wouldn't have tried it if it and I just thought it was look pretty. So I think it's not necessarily about the fact that it's not been under the microscopes. I think people have just gone, no, it's no good for that.
Maybe they didn't get a chance to see if it was any good or not, because I was doing a bit of reading about what you need to do to actually grow this bulb, and it seemed very fiddly of planting it this time and taking it out this time, putting it in the dark, and then bring it back on the spring equinox. And for me, maybe I was like, maybe it's just too bloody hard to get around. Like, no wonder it's
Well,
expensive.
I have to say I have a very love-hate relationship with tuberose because well you sat in my summer house and got beautiful jasmines, and then in front of them I've got lovely lavenders, and I wanted to plant the tuberoses behind the lavenders, and every year I go, right, I'm going to buy these, and to the point now that I actually don't even confess my sins of how much money I've spent on them each year. Nobody knows I've actually bought them, and I put them in, and every year I just go, oh, who did the thing again? So you might be right about that, yeah.
Yeah, they seem to grow well. Well, obviously they're native to Mexico. They seem to grow all right on the west coast of the USA. So if someone's able to give us some growing tips, maybe help Liz out with some gardening tips in the comments down below as well.
Yeah.
Chakra wise, you've talked a little bit about the heart. There seem to be a lot of aphrodisiac kind of references to it. I did read one reference which said just a single drop in a bottle of champagne has an amazing aphrodisiac impact. Where would you place it as a chakra essential oil?
Yeah, I would say heart, but I would also say sacral chakra.
Yeah, for me, it really does dwell in that sacral chakra because of that I guess that pleasure side that it really brings in, and just allowing us with that. And I guess you did also mention a little bit about shame and a bit of guilt, that Catholic guilt and that kind of thing, and helping to counteract that. Guilt, I find, is one of the negative emotions that can really unbalance the sacral chakra. So from that context, I think, yeah, I would kind of use it mainly for the sacral if I had to zone in on that.
What's really interesting is we're doing a course with Michelle Rox O'Neill in the school, vibrational aromatherapy, and currently we're working with numbers, and we're working with numbers around dilution and how to make like different kinds of dilution. But in order to do that, we've had to learn about the different qualities of different like the spiritual qualities of different numbers. And 6, of course, is interesting to me because it's a hexagon, but tuberosa also has 6 petals. And as I said, Polianthes means lots of petals. So if somebody hasn't seen them, I kind of remind me a bit of a delphinium. I don't know if people know what that is, but it's like a foxglove that it's got a long stem and then tiny loads and loads and loads around the side. But it has 6 petals, and 6 is the number of sensuality, of dynamic life force, love, compassion, relationships. So it kind of really, the whole thing is imbued with that beautiful number coming through, and the fact that it has loads of nectar, so therefore bees love it, and then they take it back into their hexagon, to make store their pollens. You got the beautiful like 6 coming through all the way through sensuality.
Well, at around 95 episodes, you've just introduced a brand new question of what number in numerology would be associated with this essential oil. So we've got to go and redo 95 episodes now, don't we? No, but
No, because
I
I
do.
can't do it. It takes me ages. It takes me ages, and I don't want to give away Michelle's secrets. But if people are interested in that, you can obviously come and we're on our last session today, but you can buy the recordings, and it's a fantastic group, the vibration aromatherapy group. All lots of different experiences, and people are very fast with their thoughts. So yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. And I do love that idea of that, how it could relate to that number 6. What about planetary? Where would you place it?
Moon.
Yep. I would too. Yep.
Boring,
That
boring.
relates to the
But
sacral, the white flowers, yeah.
the white flowers, and that it blooms at night. And I think that obviously I work with bees, but if somebody worked with moths, this is definitely a moth medicine. And moths, of course, butterflies and moths. What are they best associated with?
The light or the night?
I would say transformation,
Oh,
right? We all
transformation.
think
Okay.
about
Yep.
we think about the cocoon, don't we?
Yeah.
So if it was that very, very low level shamanism, I would say, if you are attracting moths, you must be involved in transformation somewhere along the line.
Very much so. Well, it's another amazing hypnotic essential oil that I think it's worth at least a whiff. I don't know whether it's always worth the investment unless something we've said today kind of springs out, because as we've kind of discussed, there's lots of other oils that could probably, on a practical point of view, would do its role as well. But I do really like it for that calming down the frenzied nights of summer and to just letting us relax like I don't know. I was going to say a cat on a hot tin roof, but that's probably not a
Not that,
kind
not
of thing.
that. So just very quickly to say that it is a lovely, safe oil to use. You definitely wouldn't want to be using it in pregnancy. First 16 weeks of pregnancy, no. I say that about every oil, but it is easy to use, and you only need the smidge because it is so pervasive. It will overwhelm any blend that you do if you put too much in. So I would usually work with just like a homeopathic dose. So 14 drops of carrier oil. So jojoba is lovely. 1 drop, and then try 1 drop of it, and maybe I'll put a second drop in if it's not balanced. But you probably don't want a whole drop of tuberose. And I mean, this scabby effort is mine. It's so old, and it hasn't got huge amounts of scent left. It's really a library thing now, but it has got some, and I do think, shamefully, that maybe 35 years old. And it's still plenty in. So
Yeah. As we wind up for this episode, there's just one question that's popped into my head that we may have discussed it at some point in time, but essential oils and expiry dates. Do oils expire if the bottle has an expiry date on it? Should we just throw it out after that? What can you guide us in that way?
this is a whole new video, this is really, but yes, they definitely do. And they you kind of do need to learn a knowledge base of them, because it's the chemistry that causes it to happen. So the most difficult ones that you're going to have are actually the cheapest. So your citrus ones will go quickly, and that's because they're rich in monoterpenes, which are tiny little molecules, and that's why they evaporate quickly. They come out of the bottle fast, but they deteriorate fast. And when that happens, then that can cause skin sensitivity, because obviously it's changed and it becomes an unstable thing. And sometimes it can have a bearing on photosensitivity, but photosensitivity is also about the lipids that come across from the oils, from it being cold compressed. But so if you are working with citrus oils, I'm sure I've said it before, I've got an auto reminder, like a subscribe thing, that and bottle of oil just appears every 6 months, so that I just go, get rid of that. But you're looking about 6 to 12 months really. Then you've got sort of the herbs. For the most part, you're looking around about 4 years, so it's quite a lot of time. Your woods, and this is not exact science, I mean, we could be on it forever and ever, but your woods and your resins, 7 to 10 years. And then if you're looking at patchouli, patchouli is a rather extraordinary thing because it's like a good wine. It gets better over time. So if you are clever, you will buy 2 bottles of patchouli and you will put one away and you will leave it there for years and years and years and years. And mine is 40 years old, and it's like you can't ever buy anything that's even close to how beautiful it is. The only one that's even come close, just as beautiful, but in a different way, is Kathy's Attar's. Just fantastic. But yeah, so for the most part, you're looking 6 to 12 months, around about 3 to 4 years, and then 7 to 10 years, and then those vetiver is a bit like that as well. It will get better over age. So when you see me using these little bottles of oil, these won't go on my skin, not at all. I use these to be able to link into the spirit of the plant. They're like a library link for me, really. Because I don't see patients anymore, so I don't need loads and loads of oils. So as long as I've got a link to go, okay, I know what that oil is, and I can get into that zone of where it is. That's all I need it for. But you certainly wouldn't want to be using something as old as this on your skin. No.
Beautiful. Yeah. One other one I think that when I was visiting, you mentioned it's kind of like the fine wine, like the patchoulis and the vetivers with sandalwood as well, wasn't it?
Sandalwood can be like that, yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Awesome. Well, that's all for this week's episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. Let us know what you think about tuberose, and if you can help Liz successfully grow them in her English garden, we would love your gardening tips down below as well. While you're lingering below, make sure you hit all those little buttons like share and subscribe, because we appreciate it. And every time you do that, a bulb sprouts in Elizabeth's garden. We'll see you next week.
Oh.
Until then, blessed be.
Bye-bye.